Media Essential Workers, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to have a special guest today. I was actually on her program a little bit earlier, but I'm more excited to have her on our program talking about the Museum of Broadcast Communications. We have the Executive Director for the Museum of Broadcast Communications, Susy Schultz. Welcome to the show, Susy. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's really good to be here. I love what you're doing, and I love how you're helping people connect. It's a wonderful job.
Well, so you've actually started a live stream for the museum as well. Tell us the name of it and tell us what the intention was when you guys started doing this, because it's something that I've seen has gotten a lot of attention, a lot of people watching. It's kind of interactive. Tell us about it.
So we have a couple of different programs that we've been doing. The one that I host is called the Happy Half Hour. We have it on Tuesdays at about 5:30. And we just really wanted to find a way because, like so many museums, when we closed down because of the pandemic, we wanted to find a way to talk to our audience, to help our audience understand what was going on. And so it's kind of become, it began as a program to talk a little bit about what was going on in the museum and what we want to do, but then it expanded to really talk about what was going on in the industry, what was going on in public affairs. I mean, pretty much the museum covers radio, television, and digital. So as you can imagine, that's pretty much the whole world right now. Because even if you're a print reporter, you're a digital reporter, you're streaming, you're on social media. So we really wanted to try to take a look and see what is it that we could do for people that would help them? That kind of the whole intent of your show, which is to help people. We wanted to help them in our way. We'll promote our colleagues in other museums. We'll promote our colleagues who are in broadcasting and doing great work that people are not actually paying attention to and should be. And we'll promote some of the news literacy, media literacy, and critical thinking stuff that goes into a lot of the work that we're doing in the museum.
Well, and I think that's absolutely fantastic because, again, when you go into a museum, it's to really experience something, to get out of the box, to learn something. And you guys have been able to take this scenario where people have been deprived of this and kind of reinvent. We use the word on your show, pivot, which I think is just a great word to describe how you guys have been able to continue in the mission and what it is that you do and do it in this new environment. What has the feedback been like for this?
Well, one of the ways when I took over the museum it was about a year ago in August of 2019. And as we were coming up, and we still have the same exhibit that opened a couple weeks after I took the job, which was called Stay Tuned. And it was an exhibit that we borrowed from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it was all about rock on TV. When in the 1940s, these two industries, the rock industry as well as the television industry, were new. And at that point, they were at opposite ends of the spectrum. Rock music, counterculture, let's rail against the man even in the 40s and 50s. And then television wanted to be the new at-home friend. It wanted to take the place of radio as the centerpiece of the family. And so they were, again, opposite ends. By the time the 50s came along and there's 17 million TVs out there, the television industry looked around and like, we're going to need this next generation. And these young kids love this music. And what it did to elevate the music, it changed rock and roll forever. And rock and roll changed television forever because all of a sudden, not only was it putting on variety shows and American Bandstand to Soul Train, which originated here in Chicago, and then all the other Sonny and Cher show and you name it. Then it actually started inventing its own rock and roll musicians by putting on made up shows. The Monkees, which were again not a group until the television show was there. The Partridge Family, and so it's a fascinating exhibit, but we knew that one was going to end. So what was going to happen? And so since I'm new to the museum world, we thought that a place of comfort for me might be where I understood the content, and then we could translate it into an exhibit. So the first exhibit we'd always planned for me to do would be about the Great Debates, because we'd actually started something a number of years ago, the Great Debates. We have at the museum the camera from CBS that filmed the Kennedy-Nixon debates, which were the first televised presidential debates. There had been debates on radio prior to that. And it was a very pivotal moment in the history of the media. So we wanted to build around that and figure, how did this work? Now, we are a nonpartisan organization, right? So we can't be talking about how this candidate did well or that candidate did well. So as we looked at how to tell this story, because essentially an exhibit is really storytelling, right? So how do we tell the story in a way that has truth, has accuracy, but also gets away from the rancor of one candidate versus the other? And so we looked at the influence of the media. And as we did this longitudinal look at this, if you watch it, that very first debate, which was in 1960, and it was Kennedy versus Nixon. Now, the amazing part about this was, the whole television world was kind of going crazy, knowing that this was happening and that it was the first of three, and it was at CBS in the old barn that is no longer there. And these two candidates, when they were on stage, those who listened to it on radio thought that Nixon won. Those who watched it on television thought that the tanned and looking healthy Kennedy won the debate. And so much went into this whole thing. For example, I think it was Walter Cronkite who had actually offered both of the candidates lessons in how to go on television, because television is very different than radio, right? And Kennedy took the classes. Nixon did not. Kennedy and Nixon were both offered makeup. Kennedy took the makeup. Nixon did not. Nixon had been hospitalized prior to this for a knee injury. And if you watch, and we watch the tape of how his car pulls into a special driveway in the CBS bus barn so that it's out of the way of the public, and he was greeted by press and stuff. And as you watch him get out of the car, there's just a small moment where his face goes. He hit his knee on the car. So he hit his injured knee as he got out of the car. So during that first exhibit, that first debate, he was in excruciating pain. And it showed on his face. They say that he was perspiring from the lights. It's very possible that he was perspiring from the pain. And he looked pale. And he was somebody who, always had that 5 o'clock shadow early in the day. He had a fast-growing beard. And so he, again, didn't have the makeup to cover it. So it was very interesting. And it was so disruptive that the next debate, I always ask people, do you have any idea when the next debate was? Do you have, Raza, any idea?
I don't know. And that's why I love these programs, because I learned so much from my guests. So tell me.
So it wasn't for 16 years after.
Wow.
And it was Ford and Carter. And the only reason, so remember, Nixon ran again, right? He didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. To me, it shows that power of broadcast. And that incredible power we often take for granted. And it was Carter and Ford. And Carter and Ford in 1976 came together. Carter was the challenger, Ford was the incumbent, and Ford was behind in the polls. And so he thought, I can do this. I have to really give it a try, because this is going to help me. And so both of the men were so afraid of looking stupid at the podium, right? Because they'd been warned and they knew what had happened, that they went through this whole debate. It was 90 minutes. At an hour and 20 minutes in, the sound went out. Wow. And both of the men are standing there at the podium. And, again, trying to look presidential, trying not to look stupid at all. But they stood there for 27 minutes because they couldn't get the sound back on. So as a result of standing there, they didn't want to move. They didn't want to go off stage, and not trying to look stupid. They actually kind of looked stupid. And the person who ended up getting hit a little bit harder was Ford, because just the prior year before that, this little show called Saturday Night Live had debuted. And the very first person that they parodied was Chevy Chase doing, a fumbling Ford, tripping over steps, putting a glass of water into his face, talking into, it was just, he was portrayed as rather goofy and inept. And so there was a ramification from not just the television. It wasn't just television that was doing it. Again, it was late night parodies. So we look at all of these moments and we say, where was the disruption? Because each time the media or the technology evolves, it actually disrupts all of us. but it's very evident in the 4-year cycle of the presidential campaigns because there's such a dramatic change in the 4 years. So we follow the evolution of not just television, but the town halls. It's one thing to be interviewed by a person in the media, a journalist. It's another thing to be interviewed by, just regular people. We looked at when there were 3 candidates in there, Ford, Perot, and Clinton. There we go. and how that dynamic changed. We looked at how social media, think about it in the 60s when it first debuted, the first debate. Nobody talked about it beforehand. There was no analysis, and there was no analysis afterwards. It was analysis in the newspapers the next day. Now we are analyzing it and discussing it in the middle of it through social media. You almost need to look at the Twitter feed as carefully as you're looking at the debate to really see where the discourse is.
And what I find fascinating is that the museum itself is doing kind of a post-debate analysis as well. And we actually have a question about that where a person asked that the analysis has been for teachers as well. And what teachable moments should educators be looking out for at the final debate this Thursday?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, we have 8 we have 8 curriculum modules for 7th, 8th grade up through 12th grade to help teachers. They're all free. They're on the website. They're downloadable, and they correspond to the core curriculum. They can overlay on top of any type of civics class that you're giving or history class. So please, if you're out there, use this. And what we'll be looking at this election, I think, is what we will be looking at this debate on Thursday. Somehow or another, I keep conflating the 2 words for no reason. But at the debate is really how are these politicians comporting themselves? What are the moments that we will like to examine the very first thing we like to examine when we do the live stream after the debates is, again, what are the moments and what do we think will be reported on? What do people will say were the win-lose moments? We don't want to assign win or lose, but we do want to anticipate what the media may be thinking. And then again, what goes deeper than that? What are the very deep win or lose moments? What are the moments where we can get students to start using their critical thinking skills and their news literacy skills to figure out what went right, what went wrong? And we want to take these moments, even the first debate, which pretty much the whole world agrees was not a debate. It was more a little bit of a debacle with people talking over one another. How do we find the teachable moments in something like that for the most part looks like it might be a horrible moment in democracy, but in reality can actually teach us what is a debate versus what isn't a debate? So we again will be looking at, we know that the rules have been changed for this debate, and we know that these candidates will, at least at different moments, their mutes will be mic'd. So is that going to matter? How is this going to play out? Is it going to be the same as the first debate? So again, we'll be comparing and contrasting, but we also will be, what the curriculum does, and what I'm most proud of is, we can say that many people have been unmoored in this time because we keep saying it is a time like no other. And in reality, every moment we go through is a time like no other, right? So what we've tried to do with this curriculum is ground some of these moments in historical context. And yes, it is a time like no other, except there was a time when we had another pandemic, and we have lessons from that. It is a time like no other, but there have been many times when we've had rancorous presidential campaigns. And what can we learn from that? And how do we move forward with this? So again, we're going to be wide open to what we are able to say, and it's all going to be based on what happens in the 90 minutes prior to the show.
Well, that's fantastic. And I look forward to seeing the next one too. I do want to talk a little about, we're talking about how this is kind of a time like no other, except there has been, but there's been new challenges for the museum. And even prior to the pandemic affecting people's ability to go in, we were talking earlier about the museum, which kind of chronicled what's happening in the news world that had to shut down because of financial issues. What was it, last year, I believe? I just want to talk about some of the challenges that your museum is facing and what you guys are doing. I know you spend quite a bit of time looking into grants. Kind of explain what it's like in your world.
We are not in the museum every day because the museum is not open every day. The next time that it's open is October 3rd, 30th, and 31st. We wanted the Halloween trick-or-treaters to get their fill of Svengoolie because we have a lot of fans for Svengoolie. We have an exhibit with him in it. But most of the time we're all working virtually. We're working at home, and we're trying to figure out, again, how to make these exhibits come to life online, not just now, but in the future. And if this is going to go on, which we know it will, through next year, we don't know when the vaccines are going to come and when we're going to go to what the city characterizes as phase 5, where things will be open all the time. What does it look like? The key for us in this museum, and one of the reasons that I was hired, was we are changing the focus of the museum. We don't want to just dwell in the world of nostalgia. We want to ask, what does this mean to all of us? So we want to look at when we're looking back at the stories that were told on television, on radio, or in the digital world, we want to know, again, this powerful, powerful force that we don't always recognize as powerful. We often dismiss as having an impact on us, but it's no longer just in our homes, it's in our pocket, right? And so we're watching it all the time. We're looking at it all the time. It shapes our thought. Who are the people that are in the stories? Who are the people that have been left out of the stories? And what's the impact one way or another? That's where we want to dwell. We want to celebrate creativity and innovation, but we also want to explore the storytelling and what effects it's had on all of us. So really what we're doing is we're thinking, we're writing, we're making proposals to foundations to say, this is what we think is important. This affects everybody. I went to the museum but 2 weeks before it closed to actually talk to them about some of their exhibits, if we could borrow some of them, if we could do some of them. And so my hope is that we will be able to do something with them in the future. But, it was a very steep price in DC, because you have to remember, in DC, majority of the museums are federally funded. We have all the Smithsonian's there, right? And those are federally funded. So those are free museums.
Right.
And so for them to compete in incredible real estate in DC with a paid price was pretty hard. So I can see where that model, at one point, for example, our museum was free. We were at the cultural center and it was free, and now we're paid. I would love it. I love to think of the idea that in the future, we can find a way to be free and open to the public, because I think, again, it's a place where not only can we facilitate exhibits, but we can also facilitate discussions between audiences and the members of the media and the broadcast world, so that we can come up with richer products, richer programming, things that gear more, and we can elevate other voices. That is crucial to us as well, that we be part of the fight to make sure that there is diversity and inclusion in the broadcast world.
What are some of your favorite exhibits? What are some of the ones that speak to you at the museum that you maybe linger a little longer than you might otherwise, just because it has that meaning to you?
Well, I do love the rock and roll, the Stay Tuned exhibit, and I linger in front of Lady Gaga's outfit and Cyndi Lauper's outfit. Those are the voices that I just adored. But there's the radio. We have the radio. We're home to the Radio Hall of Fame, and actually October 29th, we will be doing a radio broadcast across the country to induct the new class of the Radio Hall of Fame, which is the most diverse class we've ever had. And I'm very, very excited. Includes like the Breakfast Club and, a whole bunch of really interesting people. And so we have the plaques up in the Radio Hall of Fame. It's not as interactive as I would like, but I love to remember these wonderful, amazing people who formulated this industry. We have what we call a little taste of Chicago TV. We have Svengoolie, we have Oprah with her doors there. And, this kind of dates me, but one of my favorites with Bozo's back there too. And one of my favorite things back there is Garfield Goose. Garfield Goose, way before your time, my dear, was a television show that you came home from school to watch, and it was this ridiculous puppet who was king of the United States, and his prime minister was played by Fraser Thomas, and the puppets never talked; they just clacked. Garfield clacked, and the man who was the puppeteer was a master at making, with no words, making it very clear the emotions. And this was Garfield is really essentially a tea towel with a crown that I think initially was made out of a tuna can, and yet he was this fantastic world of imagination where he would say these things, and Frasier would lean into this small rabbit named Romberg Rabbit, and he would say to Romberg, "What did he say?" And Romberg Rabbit would just whisper to Frasier, and Frasier would say, "Oh, he's on a tear again about." And so when you think of this premise, it's just ludicrous, right? But it was fascinating, and you would sit there and watch this, and I love that it represents, because we all have, I think our children's television curator says, the best of times in TV is whatever was going on when you were 11.
I loved when he said that. I believe the statement was the golden age, right? Wasn't it the golden age is always the age when you were 12, I think he said. I think he gave a very definitive description and a timeline. And it's so true. Like, you can never compete with me with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. However, the last guest we had on Media Essentials, we talked to, and she introduced me to the whole Dirty Dragon thing, and I started watching that, and I'm like, how did I not know about this? And then that he ran his own presidential campaign and all that. Now I'm a fan of his. But you're right. What I was watching when I was 12 years old will always be the golden age to me.
Well, and I want to say we have all of Bill Jackson's puppets too, which are really phenomenal. There we have.
Sarah, buy my ticket right now. All the puppets there, huh?
Yeah, and it's a wonderful story of how ephemeral TV is, and production is. Some of the things that we've gotten. I mean, I think we had to convince Bill Jackson to give it. Of course, we had to convince him to give us, and we should. But they were all made out of rubber, right? Rubber's not something that lasts. And at one point, we had to call Bill Jackson. Jim Engel, our curator, is a wonderful, amazing man with such a great depth of knowledge. He had to basically call him and say, this rubber is rotting away because rubber, again, is not something that lasts for a long time. So the puppets had to be, we had to kind of shellac them, and Bill Jackson took them back and affixed them so that they're the same rubber, but they're not malleable anymore. They look great where they are, but if you were using them as puppets, you couldn't. But again, you've got, we have these doors that Oprah used in her set for several years, original set, there's big pillars with doors, and then of course they changed, they updated. And the only reason we knew about that, apparently, and I don't think this is apocryphal either, is that somebody from the network there, or Oprah show, called and basically said, "We're getting ready to put these in the dumpster." Nobody thought that and we're like, "Oh my God, we'll take them." and so the TV doesn't always have a sense of itself. Broadcast in general doesn't always have a sense of the fact that it is so historical. And it is set in people's minds that people do like to revisit it. And we like to take the revisitation and go, again, what did that mean if you were watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? What did that mean if you were watching Bill Jackson?
And it's so personal to the people who watch it, who have that memory of it. I'm going to now tell a story that kind of dates me and probably is going to make me the laughing stock of the TV station. But I will tell you this. There was an episode of Punky Brewster, and I used to, growing up, love that show. And there's one where she's kind of like walking along an edge, and she grabs onto like this optometrist, like a billboard of like glasses and a big nose there. And she's like pulling it, and it's falling. And I watched it like any kid, and then, changed the channel later. A few years later, I took a tour of NBC in Burbank, And I saw this hanging up there, the same billboard. And I'm telling my cousin, look at that. Look at that. Do you know what that is? And he's like, no. And why are you so excited? Took a picture and stuff. But again, it's something in television that when you watch it, something will stick out. Something will grab it. Something will have a memory or a meaning to you. And you're right. Just to be able to keep that piece of history, it's like, gosh, I'm a news junkie. When I grew up watching news sets and like a TV news desk, just to be able to see WLVI, which no longer exists. It was in Boston, channel 56, no longer exists. But I remember what that desk looked like. It was like a greenish hue. It was just, to me, it defined what that show, you know, what the people were there, what was part of their experience. And I'm so grateful that you guys take this and preserve that history for people.
Well, I love the work being done by our archivist. Val is amazing, and she is helping to organize and digitize some of the things that we have, which are, you know, constantly have to be updated. And we have some amazing things in the advent of television, where television was figuring out, what do people want to see? What do they want to do? We have these theatrical performances from theaters in Chicago that are just, you know, classics, total classics, as well as comedies, etc. We're very much hoping that these will be, as we move along in the next year. We want to rebuild our website, which is not exactly where we want it to be, so that people will be able to watch these. We want these open source. We want to make sure, again, that people are able to use them. They're able to see them. They're able to look back at history and see, again, where did things evolve? How did things evolve? Why did they evolve? And what does it mean to me today? You know, why are we here?
Could you give me a little bit of like a job description of an archivist at the museum? Like how does she go about finding?
Here we go. There we go. So those are my NBC chimes, and those are actually one of the original sets of NBC chimes, and they're here in my house. Only because Val gave me permission. So she takes care of these things. She makes sure that they are, you know, literally wrapped in bubble wrap, that they are chronicled. We know exactly, you know, it's almost like in court, whenever you have to prove where something came from and the chain of custody, we have to prove who gave it to us. We have to have all the paperwork about where it came from. Was it original? Is it something that is, that somebody gave us thinking that it was actually an artifact, but it was just a copy of something. So she's going for the efficacy of the, and she's also looking at, again, these online archives of ours. There is so much information there. And if you are not careful about how you organize it, it's kind of like there was an old radio show where they had Fibber McGee's closet, and Fibber McGee and Molly. Molly would always say, "No, don't open the closet," and you would hear all this noise of things tumbling out. And what's fascinating, I didn't live through that era of radio, but I actually saw that exhibit when the museum was at the Cultural Center, because they had a replica of Fibber McGee's closet there, and so finding out what is it that we have, who used to own it, what's the paperwork behind it, what are the shows that we have, what is the condition that they're in. Some things, you know, you can't just have them sit around forever. Tape actually is destroyed. We have one of the only extensive collections of nightly newscasts. The majority of nightly newscasts, until they were online and digitized, when everything was digitized, rather, they would throw away some of these tapes because they would use them for something else because nobody had the budgets for that. So our founder actually founded the museum when he started noticing that these things were being thrown away that were a part of history. So, you know, they're not built to last. So we have to figure out how to shore them up to make sure that they can last in perpetuity. And so she is constantly looking through things. Again, we have extensive archives, but I don't think there has always been consistency in how we chronicle everything. And Val is just dogged at making sure that everything is chronicled, that we know exactly where it is. But you think about it, if I just don't do the date the same way. So if I do 9/20/20, or if I do 9-20-20, it's very different. And a searchable database won't be able to find the two different things, right? You have to actually make sure that the data is entry. So she's going back over decades of things and making sure that our data is accurate, so that if we want something, if you and the public want something, if somebody making a historical documentary, if they want it, we'll have it and you'll be able to use it. I mean, it's no good if this stuff is all just under glass and we're the only ones that get to see it, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And you're making me feel guilty for when I was a kid and I used to take books from here and there, and the Dewey Decimal System meant nothing to me, because you're right, it complicates the job of somebody. So one thing I do want to ask you is obviously, like, there's been a limitation in how many people can go there, and what's going on. What's some ways that people can help the museum, and what's the ways they can keep great programs and great archives like this going, and just support the museum?
Oh, you're wonderful. Thank you for saying that. You can donate. You can donate. Every dollar helps. Every dollar helps. If you go to museum.tv, you will make sure to see us. And there's a button there that says donate. You can join. You can have a membership. We will send you some old time radio clips. You get about 79 shows for free for a membership. And you can go to the website and follow us on Facebook, so that you know when the programs are coming up, because we're having a lot of online programming. And again, I would ask you to dig deep. If the relevancy of broadcast is important to people, if you can donate, that would be just very special. It helps us get along. And we're like every museum, not every museum, but we're like many museums at this point. We really believe, and I have a positive attitude, that we are going to get through this, but we don't know. We just really don't know whether or not the future includes us in it, because of course it's a lot. It's an awful lot. We're hopeful, but we could use every cent that anybody is willing to give us. Okay.
Really appreciate you saying that, Susy. And I know a lot of the viewers and participants on these programs like to support anything that is, protecting the institution of journalism, of broadcast, anything we can do to kind of give back. That's kind of the whole crux of what it is we do here. So again, if there's anything you can do to support and just keep an institution as fine as the Museum of Broadcast Communications going, obviously do it. I don't even need to tell anyone. But a great thank you so much again, Susy Schultz, for joining us on Media Essential Workers. Just want to see if there's any final thoughts you want to leave our viewers with.
No, I am so thrilled. Just the title of your show is phenomenal, because Media Essential Workers, they are supporting the media that tells the stories, that keep us informed. You know, what you're doing is amazing, and we are colleagues in that. And that our work as well is to tell the stories of, again, the media that's supporting us and keeping us entertained and informed during this pandemic.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, Susy. Thank you all for watching. Again, we appreciate you, and thank you for tuning in. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.